And how about scope creep?
Honestly, scope creep happens on every single project. I don't think there's a project that I have worked in the last 14 years that has not had some element of scope creep. And I feel like scope creep has somewhat of a bad name. And I think honestly that the main reason for that is because it's tied to those fixed price bids. Because what ends up happening is somebody comes in with an idea, they have a set of requirements, the contractor or whoever, and this even happens with internal teams. The internal team estimates what they think that's going to be, or the contractor estimates what they think that's going to take. And then during the development process, some aspects of it don't turn out the way that it was expected, or they turn out exactly the way they're supposed to, but it just doesn't meet the need that you thought it was going to ahead of time. And so scope creep is really the evolution of a product or project. Now, there is bad scope creep where something just sort of goes on indefinitely and you never get to a point where you can ship a product. But some element of scope creep, frankly, I think is actually good for a project because going back to that idea of getting what you want out of it versus just what you described in the initial requirements document, unless you have perfect 2020 vision to the future and every possible thing that could happen along the way, the likelihood of there being some deviation between your initial requirements document and what you actually want in the end is extremely high. That delta is scope creep. The idea behind how we do work is that because we don't have a fixed price bid, because we don't have a fixed requirements document that we are tied to for that fixed price bid, we are working very closely with our clients all the way through the process. And so we identify early anything that needs to change and we make that change. The result of that is that oftentimes it's actually getting in front of the scope creep because if there's a requirement for a particular feature and we go through and develop that feature all the way through, and then the client says, you know what, that doesn't do what I want it to do. And we have to go back and redesign that to do something differently. That's a lot of lost time and a lot of lost resources in there. And that's the sort of traditional scope creep. However, if we're working very closely with our clients as we go through the process, and rather than developing this feature all the way to completion, early on, we see, I don't know if this is working quite the way that they thought it was going to. And 10% of the way through, we meet, we talk about it, we review it, we look at alternatives, and we realize, wait a second, we really should be going down this different path to solve that problem. Well, now you've saved 90% of those costs that would have gone towards developing what is ultimately going to be scrapped because it wasn't going to meet the need. And so, in that sense, I feel like it's a much more efficient way to get to that end goal, which is the product that you
Yeah.
want.